What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy and I'm your host today. And today we are going to discuss signs that you're doing too much. Okay, so signs of fatigue that may pop up, and if you get your head around them and you kind of get an understanding of them, you'll be able to pick up on these before you get to the point that you get injured, okay, or that you suffer with some type of a flare-up, or that you get some type of a chronic injury from overuse, okay? So this is the most common thing in when it comes to, like, when you're looking at somebody's load over a whole season, is that they don't pick up on these signs, and then they end up getting injured in something that could have been preventable, okay? Now, obviously, all injuries aren't preventable, but you can reduce the risk significantly, and just being fatigued is going to cause, or is going to increase your risk significantly. So I'm going to just go through it. I'll try to keep it short and sweet, and hopefully be able to cover everything that you'll be able to take away, and you'll have a better understanding of how the body reacts to fatigue and to overtraining. Okay. Now, before I jump on this, I want to put out there that I will be taking on more clients in the next couple of weeks, and over the next couple of months. I have had a good few clients jump on board, especially with our back pain is kind of the most one, back spasms, people that are getting flare-ups that would have had it for a couple of years and now want to finally take control of that again. Now, if that sounds like you, if it's something that you'd be interested in, then definitely get in contact with me. A lot of these people would have had bulging discs, would get back spasms, would have had flare-ups that would have stopped them doing activities that they enjoy, so different sports, or even stopped them doing certain exercises in the gym. And the goal of a lot of these programs, obviously everyone's individual and everyone's a small bit different, but is to get them back doing what they love again. So if it sounds like you, get in contact with me. Either send me an email at mobilityshooter@gmail.com, or you can just get in contact with me on Instagram. We'll set up a call, we'll discuss different options, and then from there we can make a bit of a plan, okay? And that's across the board. I just use back pain because that's what the majority of people have got in contact with me in the last couple of weeks. Other than that, we've had Achilles, we've had knee pain, ACL, injuries that would have kicked up again, shoulder injuries, hip injuries. So it's literally everything across the board. If you're interested in that, just send me a message. Now, without further ado, what we'll do is we'll get straight into this podcast, and we will start talking about what the problem is at the moment. So really, at the minute, I see a lot of people now, and this isn't just GAA, this is across the board with runners and everything, that they love, once they're in season, especially because we've been out of it for so long and we've been locked down, that they want to go full on and they want to get everything covered. So because they do that, you find themselves then pushing on, trying to get other things covered. And then when you start training, that paradox of you feel like you're flying at the start, but once you actually get into it, then you have a better idea of all the places that you need to improve, and then you start picking up on those. Now, I love that idea. I love the mindset that comes behind that. But we have to know when to pull the reins back and when it's time to relax and give the body a chance to recover and adapt, because that's how it works. It's that stress and adaptation system, okay? So people do focus on training probably a small bit too much and not the recovery side of things. And the recovery side of things is extremely important if you want to get the adaptations from the sessions that you've been doing. So an analogy I always use is that you're burning the candle from both ends. So it's going to burn out a lot faster if that's what you're doing. All right, so we need to look at how we are affecting it and what we can do. And the body will then generally give you signs. So it will generally say, okay, right, you're doing too much now. So it's time to pull back. I'm fatigued, I'm tired. And if you're aware of your body, you'll pick up on these and you'll know when to schedule a recovery day. Now, everybody gets caught with this. Like, for a guy who's talking about now, who's telling you how to do it, it is something that I have got caught with in the past, and something I've got caught with recently as well. It's just trying to do too much and thinking I can keep going that bit further, and then maybe the sleep getting affected, and just thinking, okay, it's all right, I will get a recovery day soon enough, and then never actually planning it, and then getting caught out with a shoulder injury or a hip injury or something like that, or even sickness. To be honest, is what really caught me recently. Is I just was training like a dog. I was training all day, or not all day, I was training during the day, I should say, and then I was surfing, and I was doing jiu-jitsu, and then I was sleeping very poorly at night, and I was only sleeping maybe 5 hours because I wanted to keep a consistent routine that I was getting up at the same time all the time. So trying to get up at 7, half 7 every day. It's not too early, obviously, but I was staying up late and trying to get extra work done because obviously I'm on a different time schedule at the minute now that I'm in Bali. So because of that, I was doing that for a couple of weeks, got caught, and got very, very sick with it. So really important that you do take note of it and that you do plan your sessions and that you do just plan a recovery day and just pull the reins back a small bit, and you will notice when you get back into it that your performance increases. You won't have any decrement in your performance. I used to hear a lot in the gym people say, geez, I took a week off there, I'd really feel it. And you do feel the first session back, definitely, because it's your first session back. You'll just feel like you're getting the rust off. But from there, that's when you will really notice the change in strength, in performance, in your fitness, and everything around it. That's when you really get the gains. So first off then, what actually causes the body to break down? Well, as I said above, it's going to be excessive stress or too much training without recovery. Okay, and it doesn't have to be that you are training like a dog every single day, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, but it could be that you're just never getting your chance or giving your body a chance to recover. Now, there's a lot of things that play into recovery. It's not as simple as you just have to not train on a day, because you have to take into account what's affecting recovery is stress. And stress is, you could say, psychological stress and physical stress. So physical stress is obviously exercise. Psychological stress can be a lot of different things. Anything that makes you anxious, makes you worried, all that plays into it. Okay. Now that will affect your ability to recover, because as you heard me talking about before, the nervous system works in these two type of tones. So you have a parasympathetic tone and you have a sympathetic tone. Now your parasympathetic tone is basically a rest and digest, and your sympathetic is a fight or flight. Okay, and people would have heard me talk about this a good bit on Instagram. You would have heard me talk about this in other podcasts. I've went into a lot of detail on it before. And so to not go into too much detail, you can't be in both at the same time. So you can't be on a fight or flight, or you can't be in rest and digest. So I always say, think of it as a dial. If the dial is turned back to 0, you're asleep. If it's turned up to 10, you're having a panic attack. Okay, so think of it that way, and you'll get a better understanding of you need to turn back the dial and click back the dial to get into a recovery state, as opposed to always being stuck in a fight or flight state. And there's a lot of things that keep that dial turned up. So like things such as simple as having a tight schedule that you're under pressure all the time and you're trying to get from one place to the next, and you're putting yourself under too much pressure to get things done, or presentations, if you're fighting with your boss, all of that is going to play a role in whether you're getting proper recovery in or not. Okay, so it is important to think of it like that, and to get a better understanding of what could be contributing to higher tones on the dial. Okay, now moving on from there, I wanted to discuss, is overtraining an issue in amateur athletes? Now, amateur athletes goes completely across the board, because the majority of, or every single, let's say, Olympic boxer is amateur. So every single intercounty GA player is amateur. So you obviously have elite amateurs, and then you have the weekend warrior amateurs, people who are going out and playing 7-a-side on an Astro. Okay, so in general, overtraining isn't an issue with amateur athletes. Now, you might have it that people are training a small bit too much and then not getting enough time to recover, but really what I would say is that it's more that people aren't recovering as opposed to actually overtraining. Because overtraining is when you get to a certain point that the body actually it breaks down because of you're doing so much training. So it's actually a negative effect on your training. So you start losing performance, you start really, I suppose, getting fatigued, getting severely fatigued, but then you also get depressive symptoms, your mood changes, you can have mood swings. There's a lot of things involved in actual overtraining syndrome. Okay, so it's a maladaptive response really to excessive exercise is probably the best way of describing it. Okay, and it affects a lot of different body systems, such as your immune system, your neurological system, and one I can really struggle to say is endocrinologic system. So with that, it's going to be coupled with like mood changes as well, as I've said. So that's overtraining syndrome, and it usually happens to athletes who are training 4 hours a day every day, so let's say 6-7 days a week. So really pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits of what their body can handle. So that's why I say overtraining itself is probably not as much of an issue with amateur athletes as not recovering is. Okay, and there's a small difference. Not recovering is that you're just the body is running, if you think of it as a battery, 100% being when you're fully fit and ready to go. The body's probably running on 60% for a lot of people. Okay, and they're still training on top of that. Now, you will see it more commonly with the likes of endurance athletes who get into, like, let's say, long distance sports, so like running, cycling, let's say triathletes, ultra running. I don't know how people get into that in the first place, because Jesus, I couldn't think of anything worse myself to get into. But obviously there's a serious mental side to that game, and with the mental side to endurance performance or endurance sports, there is always that side of, okay, I felt good after that run, so let's continue and do more and do more, and they get caught up in that trying to do more. Now, GAA is a small bit different, and rugby would be a small bit different in that you play, you train, and you're training for a match, and then a lot of the time you have more matches, or like you have more matches than people will run in races. Okay, now obviously it completely depends on time of the year and that, but in the middle of the season, a lot of people could be playing a match every weekend. If you're playing football and hurling, or if you're playing rugby at a couple of divisions, or with a couple of different teams, especially when it comes to like college sports as well, that's when it really becomes an issue. Okay, so both of them are very prone to it. Obviously soccer is just as much so, but what I want to kind of take into account is that we are looking more so at the fact that people aren't recovering, okay, and that they're just running on 60% battery all the time, 50% battery, and then they continue to train at the same rate. So that's really, really the biggest issue when it comes to overtraining in amateur sports, okay? Now, just to kind of go back to rugby and GAA, and GAA especially is one because it's an amateur sport. People forget that you have to go and you have to work during the week. So you're still training in the gym in the morning, you might be training in the evening, and then you might have your matches at the weekend. But then these people have to go back to work as well. And it is the same for amateur athletes and endurance sports and rugby and all that. Even though rugby, there's a semi-professional side to it as well, which is good to see. It's good to see players getting paid, whether it be legal or not. But still, I like to see it with the amount that they're training, especially at the higher levels. Now, moving back, as I was saying, it's with GAA players, it's when they're trying to fit in gym sessions or trying to fit in fitness sessions during the week while they're still training with their team. They might be training with two teams, and then they're trying to get matches at the weekend. And it's that mindset of actually trying to catch up on everything in season, as opposed to planning out your cycles and actually planning out when is the best time to train and when is the best time to recover to optimize adaptation. Because that's in general one of the reasons why you're training is, well, it's one of the main reasons why you're training, especially for competitive sport, is to optimize adaptation. And adaptation happens in recovery periods. Okay, so it's going to be something you'll hear me coming back to all the time. Adaptation happens when you're resting and when you're recovering. It doesn't happen as much. Well, it does, obviously. You get your muscles and your neurological system gets marked for adaptation, but that's not actually when it happens. It happens when you sleep and when you rest and when you recover. So when is it time to schedule a recovery period, a recovery day, a recovery week? Now, I always say to any of the clients that I'm working it with, it does, when I am working with them, if they're playing sports and that, it kind of gives me a better idea, because I can look at their schedule in advance and we can actually plan recovery days and plan recovery weeks and that, so it makes it that much easier. But what I'll say to people, let's say who I'm not working with directly, is you need to plan your recovery days in advance, because if you don't, a lot of the time you'll just get caught up in the cycle of do a bit more training, I'm feeling good today, do a small bit more, I'm feeling good today, do a small bit more. Okay, and then it'll all come back at once, usually. So assess your training blocks in advance and look at it on the micro, meso, and the macro. Now, micro is when you're looking at it weekly, meso is when you're kind of looking at a training block, so maybe 6 weeks, 12-week block, and then macro is when you're looking over the whole season. Okay, now I would be always trying to plan a rest week or a real down week with my athletes around about 6 weeks into their training, because I just like that marker. Usually you'll see that that's when things start to kick up a small bit more, depending on how many high weeks, how many low weeks they've had in that cycle. But in general, the 6 week mark is a very basic one that works for a lot of people. So train hard for 6 weeks and then you can relax just for a week. It doesn't have to be you do nothing at all, but just making sure that you have a low week every 6 weeks is a good way. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you have 100% weeks for every week before that. You obviously have to have your highs and lows in that as well to optimize adaptation, but it is a good it is a very basic or very general rule to follow. Okay, now how do you know itself, like what signs does the body actually give you before it starts to break down? Like, what would you start to notice more? Well, the very first one is you'll notice that you're in, like, this is when it's pushing on and you're getting very fatigued, is that in older injuries will start to flare up again. So for me, I noticed it when my shoulder starts to get sore or my hip starts to get sore. That's when I really notice that, okay, I'm doing a small bit more. If you've had an ACL surgery, you can be nearly sure that it's going to be your knee is going to kick up first. If you've had a shoulder surgery, you can be sure that your shoulder is probably going to kick up first. And the reason that happens is because of that sensitization to too much stimulus, okay, and in those areas. So I've talked about this in a lot of detail on multiple podcasts before, and I direct anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about to my pain sensitized or pain experience podcast. It'll be within the first 5, maybe 3 or 4, and in that one I go into a lot of detail on it, what causes it, what is sensitivity, and what does it mean. Now, really quickly, if you have an imprint on your system from an injury or a trauma, your body basically, sensitivity to pain, it gets really good at recognizing too much load on that area. So it gets really good at recognizing when you are doing too much, and then that's the first area that will kick up with pain or with tightness. Now, before that happens, what can actually happen is you will actually start to get a small bit irritable and anxious about things, and you'll notice that your mood changes as well. Now, these are very common effects of fatigue. So what you're looking at when you're doing too much is you're looking for just general signs of fatigue, and irritability and anxiousness is a huge one. So when you're doing too much, and as I said at the start, I'm not just talking about training itself. I'm talking about your training combined with everything else that contributes to load. So your stress on a day-to-day, what your sleep is like, what your hydration is like, what your diet is like, what your movement is like, and your activity levels. All these things play into load. And having an idea of that and understanding that, okay, I've had a tough week at work, or I had to get a project due, so I was working overtime most days, and then I was in tight schedule. I had to pick people up and drop people off, and you might have kids doing the leaving cert when that's added stress. That's obviously going to put it onto you. You might have exams coming up. That's another one that's going to really, really add to your stress levels. And you'll notice that you'll become a bit more anxious of everything around you. And that's just the body is kind of fought. You can see it slowly but surely moves into this protective mode. With that, then you will have, I suppose the easiest sign is excessive fatigue. You will actually feel a lot more fatigued. You might have to go for a nap after lunch. You might find it very, very hard to get up out of bed in the morning. Huge one, big sign that it's that the body is or the fatigue is starting to mount up, is if you're really struggling to get out of bed in the morning. If you're gassed at nighttime, that's another one, but that's a small bit. Like, most people would be tired at nighttime. It's just that if you're really struggling to get through the day, that's probably a better sign of it. Then you'll notice your motivation drops. And this is a big one that I notice as well. So if I'm doing too much, I'll find that my motivation drops massively. So I won't have the same interest in, let's say, going to training. I might not have the same interest in doing other activities. I probably do have the same interest in going to training, but I won't have any other interest in doing other activities. I'll be very strict in my kind of routine because it's the easiest thing for me. You fall back on your habits when you're fatigued. So it is a simple one. I'll definitely start to really not avoid activities exactly, but just I won't be as keen to go trying out new things. And I'll find, especially when I'm sitting down to work, that like I'll be thinking, oh, I have to do another podcast, or oh, I have to get content up for this week. And once I start noticing that kicking in, because I actually do love making podcasts and I do enjoy making content. Once I notice that kicking in, then I'm like, all right, okay, it's probably time to pull back the reins a small bit more. Okay. Physical signs then would be like your muscle soreness and aching, and excessive amounts of that. Okay, so you're going to have muscle soreness if it's your first time back at the gym, or if you had an increase in a training session. But if that's lasting for 3, 4, 5 days, muscles are starting to get really tight, and your shoulders might be aching. Really good one for people, I think, to remember is that your traps a lot of the time, so your upper back starts to get tight, especially if you're sitting doing an office job and you're sitting there all day. That's usually when people start to get tightness up there. Big sign of fatigue as well at times. So definitely take a look at all your outside factors and how they may be contributing to that. Are you sleeping enough? And on top of that, then performance is gonna be affected. So your decision making will slow. your judgment will be affected. And now this is as the signs get now more severe, you'll notice that a bit more, and you'll notice that your mood will be down, and you'll have, I suppose, depressive symptoms. So you will feel like you're going nowhere. You'll feel like you just cannot get the energy up to do anything. You'll be low mood. Your voice might come through in your voice. Might see bags underneath your eyes. A lot of that will come into it. Now, at the end stages, you're not the end stages, but Jesus, I made it sound there like it was going to be the end, yeah. But at the, I suppose, more severe stages, then you start to get headaches and dizziness, and that's a big one as well. If you start to get those, it's time to really look at what's going on, because there's no point going on. Obviously, there could be other things contributing to that as well, but if they're coming on out of nowhere, and you're training like a dog, it's probably time to pull back the training a small bit, okay? And you have to do that, or you're just burning the candle from both ends, and at a stage then you're going to start feeling fairly, I suppose, either sick, tired. Your motivation will be ridiculously low. You won't want to do anything. You won't enjoy the activities you are doing, and you're going to be at a very high risk of injury as well because of that, okay? So that's the main ones. As I said, irritability and anxiousness is a big one. Low motivation, excessive aching, a lot of muscle soreness, difficulty waking up in the morning, very fatigued throughout the day, kind of find it hard to get going, only waiting for your next cup of coffee is be a good sign as well if you're really looking for the next cup of coffee all the time. If your coffee or caffeine consumption increases significantly, so you go from, let's say, 2 cups of coffee a day up to 3, 4, 5, then that's a massive sign that things are working against you, and that the body is trying to let you know that it needs rest time and it needs recovery time. And rest and recovery is actually getting out of the way of what you're doing. So changing your routine slightly, in that you aren't, how would you say it, that you aren't in a position that anything is going to be, I want to say stressing you out, but I don't want to continue using that word, but just in a position that you're not always in high alert fight or flight state. So always under a tight schedule, having something to do, putting a lot of pressure on yourself, all of those things, and then obviously training on top of that. So really important, step back and take a day off. And talking to clients as well, I think when you're planning rest and recovery days, I usually try to aim for a weekend. So it can be a full rest and recovery day. Like a Sunday is an excellent day that you should just mark if you have the opportunity, if it's something you can do. Obviously people play matches at Sundays, but I think a Sunday is a great day if you don't have a match to use as a recovery day. Because in general, unless now you're working in the restaurant industry or something like that, most people don't work on a Sunday. So you don't have those other stressors that are mounting up as well. And you can use it as a full recovery day. So that's a good one as well. Now, how do you test your recovery? How do you test to see if you are fatigued? Is there any simple tests you can do? Well, there's a really, really good one, a really interesting one. It's a carbon dioxide offloading, carbon dioxide tolerance test. And basically what you do is you inhale and exhale 4 times, normal inhale, exhale. So that's obviously faster than it should be, but just for example, so you do it 4 times. That's your 4. That was way faster than anyone should do it. And then you take a big inhale. So all the way in, fill out your ribs completely. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hold it and then make a straw out of your lips. And I want you to let the air out of your body as slowly as possible. Okay, so really, really slow and all the way out. And you do this first thing in the morning. And keep blowing out all the way, so as slow as you can. Now, when you get to the point that you can't breathe out anymore, or you're starving for oxygen, which shows that there's too much carbon dioxide in your body, take note of that, okay? And what I mean is, if you set a timer at the start and you do that exhale, you should be able to get over 30 seconds, okay? 30 to 60 seconds is kind of what they say is the green zone. Now, it's going to be different for everybody, but if you can get into that zone, in general, now I would actually be aiming for upwards of 50 to 60 seconds and longer, even if you can get it up to 2 minutes, 120 seconds. That's a real sign that you're ready to go. But what that's testing is it's testing your ability for your body to get into a parasympathetic state. So it's ability of the body to actually get into a rest and recovery state. So doing that, inhale, exhale 4 times, big inhale as much as you can, hold, and then as slowly as you can release all that air. And then once you get down to the bottom, it should be over 30 seconds. If it's under 30 seconds, you're definitely not recovered, and you should probably take time or take a day off. Okay. Now, the only way you're going to be able to do this is if you test what your average is, maybe at the end of a recovery week, where you are actually fully recovered and the body's feeling good, and then you'll know what your average number is. So you might get, on a normal week, you might get, let's say, 100 seconds. Okay. Now, if you do get that, and then you start to notice a 10 to 20% drop in it, okay, that's probably time to look at recovering as well. So if you do it at the start, that you time it, and then you'll have that as a marker as you go through your year or through your sessions, then you can fall back on that again. So let's say, as I said, if you get to if you time it and you get to 100 seconds, and then it drops by 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds, then it's probably time to look at trying to squeeze in a recovery day where possible. Okay, but if it's under 30 seconds, then it's definitely time to fit in a recovery day. Between 30 and 60, it is that green zone. It's you're probably okay to go, but I think 20 or the 10, 20, 30% decrements in performance would show that you it's probably time to look at planning a recovery day if possible. So that's that CO2 test. Very simple. Do it in the morning, first thing in the morning. Another thing you can check really quickly is if you look at your heart rate. Now, this is obviously a really general rule, but if you get your heart rate on a normal day when you're not training, and you check your heart rate in the morning and it has elevated, so let's say your normal heart rate is around about 60 beats per minute, you wake up in the morning and you check it again, first time, and it's at 70, 80, 90, then you haven't recovered from the session fully the night before. General rule, as I said, so that doesn't apply to everyone, but it can be used. You'll see that it will be elevated in the morning, and it might be time just to give yourself a few more hours to relax down, or a day to relax down, if that stays up for a long time. Okay, but they are all general rules. Keep an eye on all the signs that I said about that, how you would get fatigued, how injuries might start flaring up, how you might become more irritable, anxious, how you get that muscle soreness or even weakness and power loss, and then noticing that your training is increasing but your performance is decreasing. Muscle tightness, another huge one. If muscle tightness is there, most likely it's getting fatigued, because that's a protective mechanism. Low mood, depression, headache, dizziness, and then difficulty waking up in the morning. All of those things, take those into account, and you'll have a better understanding of when it's actually time to relax and when it's time to take a break. So guys, that is everything I wanted to discuss today. If anyone has any questions on that, make sure to get in contact with me. Send me a message on Instagram or send me an email. They're the two easiest places to get in contact with me. I'm also building my LinkedIn at the moment. So I have Mobility Tutor and I have Robbie Cassidy, whichever one is easiest for you to join. I'd love if you could follow me and connect with me on that. And yeah, that's kind of everything I wanted to discuss today. So just leaving it on that. As I said, I'll be taking on more clients over the next couple of weeks. If you have an injury that's going on a long time, and you want to have a second opinion on it, and things that haven't worked in the past, and you're looking just to get it right, definitely send me a message and we can discuss different options. As I was saying, I do one-to-one coaching over a longer term, so that'll be 3 months to 6 months, and we go through into a lot of detail on the educational side of things, while also providing you with a program to work on weekly. Or I do physio consultations as well, where we set up and we talk through everything and we go through movements and we have a look at it. So if you get in contact with me, we can discuss options and we can go from there. But that's everything from me today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you can subscribe on Spotify, on iTunes, and leave a comment or a rating on iTunes. Same thing, subscribe on Spotify as well, and YouTube. That would be massive. And the best way that you can help me get this podcast out there, so you can I suppose promote this podcast, is to either share it on your story or to send it to a friend. And I would be very grateful if you could do that. So thank you so much if you've done it already. I know people have been doing it recently, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And yeah, that's it, guys. Any questions, send them on to me. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Have a good one.